everyone, Hungry Reader here. And if you're like me, you may not be gay, but you are definitely a friend of Dorothy. The movie Legends of Oz: Dorothy's Return is now in theaters. Although from the reviews it's been getting, I guess I'll be lucky if it's on Redbox by the time anyone sees this video. It's based on the 1989 book Dorothy of Oz by L. Frank Baum's great-grandson, Roger S. Baum. But you didn't really think that Dorothy would have to wait 3 generations to make it back to Oz, did you? It's not a real Oz story without her. L. Frank Baum brought Dorothy back to Oz in his 3rd book in the series, Ozma of Oz. The first book was a fairy tale that came to him as he wrote it, and the second was a stage musical in print form, but this is the book that cemented Oz as a series, indicating future stories to be told. And the series definitely starts out with one of the best. Ozma of Oz is one of the most frequently retold Oz stories, besides the first one. Even if you've never actually read it, large parts of it might already be familiar to you. Ozma of Oz, a record of her adventures with Dorothy Gale of Kansas, the Yellow Hen, the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, TikTok, the Card Lion, the Hungry Tiger, etc., by L. Frank Baum. Illustrated by John R. Neal. Read and specially illustrated by The Hungry Reader. Our story begins in neither Kansas nor Oz, but on board an ocean liner bound for Australia. On board are Dorothy and Uncle Henry, whose health took such a serious turn after the tornado that the doctor ordered him to visit Australia. Apparently this was how stress was treated at the turn of the century. Medicinal Australia. Take 2 of these and call me in the morning. And we complain about healthcare.gov being buggy. As the seas get rough, Dorothy emerges from below decks to find Uncle Henry. I must warn you, what you're about to see will change your view of Oz forever. You may have already known that Dorothy was a fearless little badass. You may have already known that Tip was secretly Ozma all along. But this is a part of Oz that never, ever, ever gets acknowledged. Dorothy is blonde! Oh, they've told us for years and years Dorothy has dark hair and pigtails. It's a filthy lie. In every book but the very first, Dorothy is always portrayed with short, blonde hair. She also usually wears this funny flapper dress with the stovepipe silhouette and potbelly enhancing low belt. While looking for Uncle Henry during the storm, Dorothy gets swept overboard and out to sea, clinging to a crate that had been full of chickens on their way to Australia. Poor Dorothy is lost again, but things turned out okay for her last time, so she decides to wait it out and see what happens. Next morning, the SS Dorothy lands on the beach of a strange land, and Dorothy realizes she's not alone. There's a chicken still in the crate named Bill. How does she know that its name is Bill? It tells her.
Bill? Why, that's a boy's name. What difference does that make? Bill have always been called, and Bill is my name. If you don't mind, I shall call you Billina. Putting the "ina" on the end makes it a girl's name.
The fact that a hen is talking to her is Dorothy's first clue that she's somewhere very strange. The second is the indigenous flora.
The little girl came upon 2 trees that promised to furnish her with plenty of food. One was quite full of square paper boxes, and upon the biggest and ripest boxes the word lunch could be read in neat raised letters.
Trees that grow Chinese food? Forget truffulas, I want to grow over those!
The tree next to the lunchbox tree was even more wonderful, for it bore quantities of tin dinner pails, which were so full and heavy that the stout branches bent underneath their weight.
On a personal note, one thing I really appreciate about this book is how it demonstrates the very clear difference between a lunch box and a pail. You know, now, I don't care what your regional colloquialisms are, okay? This is not a lunch pail. This is a box. You don't say, Jack and Jill went up the hill to get a box of water. Box, pail. Box, pail. Box, pail. Get it right.
While Dorothy enjoys her freshly picked lunch, Billina finds her own breakfast. She also finds a key washed up on the beach, and a message saying, "Beware the Wheelers." And who, you may ask, are the Wheelers?
Wheelers are aggressive quadrupeds with wheels made of keratin instead of hands and feet. They're also sometimes known to shoot fireballs and create Too Much Coffee Man.
Dorothy and Billina head for the narrow places in the hills where the furious Wheelers can't follow them. The trail they find ends at a locked door in the wall. Dorothy tries that key she found on the beach, and inside they find a robot.
As a matter of fact, it's the very first robot in modern literature, from before the word robot was even coined. His name is Tick-Tock, not to be confused with Tock the Watchdog. And yes, his name is spelled just like that asinine song.
Tick-Tock is powered by 3 clockwork motors, one for his brain, one for his mouth, and one for his body. When Dorothy winds him up, he pledges his service to her, as his old master, the evil king, is dead.
This cruel king had a lovely wife and 10 beautiful children, but in a fit of anger he sold them all to the Gnome King. Afterward the king regretted this wicked action. In despair he locked me up in this rock, threw the key in the ocean, then jumped in after it and was drowned.
With Tick-Tock as her slave, his words, not mine, Dorothy returns to the beach, where Tick-Tock shows the Wheelers just what the difference is between a lunchbox and a dinner pail.
Rattledy-bang-bang went the dinner pail in every direction, and it made so much clatter against the heads of the Wheelers that they fled in a great panic, all except their leader.
You'll be sorry for treating me this way. I'm a terribly fierce person.
You are wrong to think yourself fierce. Your wheels make you helpless to injure anyone, for you have no fists and cannot scratch or even pull hair, nor have you any feet to kick with. All you can do is yell and shout.
Now my people are ruined forever. You've discovered our secret.
Spoken like a general, Mr. Tock. The captive Wheeler takes them to the royal palace of Ev. That's where they are, by the way. It's the land of Ev. It's actually Oz's neighbor to the northwest. They're separated by the deadly desert. They don't do much trade.
In the absence of the royal family, the land of Ev is ruled by Princess Languideer, who isn't exactly evil, but she does have a sort of multiple personality disorder. This is because every one of her 30 interchangeable heads has a different personality. And poor Dorothy just happened to meet her on the day she was wearing the mean one.
Oh, I thought someone of importance had called. Are you of royal blood? Better than that, ma'am. I came from Kansas. You are rather attractive. I believe I'll take your head and give you number 26 for it. Well, I believe you won't.
Go, girl! Head-stealing witches are no match for the notorious FLB!
But Tick-Tock wound himself down by fighting off all those Wheelers earlier, and Dorothy finds herself locked up in a prison tower.
Is this starting to sound familiar to you? In my last Oz video, I mentioned that Jack Pumpkinhead and the Gump appeared in the 1985 Disney film Return to Oz. This book, Ozma of Oz, is where most of the rest of that movie comes from.
Although it's been transplanted from Ev to Oz, the events of the book are reproduced very faithfully. Dorothy washes up with Billina in a chicken coop,
I've never been so wet in my whole life.
finds the lunch pail tree,
This one for now.
meets Tick-Tock and the Wheelers,
You'll be sorry for treating me like this! I'm a terrible person!
and finally gets locked in a tower by the princess with 30 heads. In the movie, though, Mombi and Languideer are merged into one truly terrifying villainess.
Dorothy, girl.
That's Return to Oz for you. 1/3 The Marvelous Land of Oz, 1/3 Ozma of Oz, and 1/3 Nightmares from director Walter Murch's darkest imagination. It's my favorite movie ever.
Dorothy is trapped in the tower like the proverbial princess, with Tick-Tock helpless and Billina confined to the hen house. But all is not lost. Who's that crossing the deadly desert on a magic carpet? It looks like... Could it be? Could it be? It is!
The Cowardly Lion is back! And the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and Ozma and all their friends.
The whole gang is back together again. Ozma, the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion have all come to Dorothy's rescue. Jack Pumpkinhead and the Wogglebug seem to be sitting this one out, but the lion has brought along a kindred spirit, the Hungry Tiger.
I'm a savage beast and have an appetite for all sorts of poor little living creatures, from a chipmunk to fat babies.
How dreadful!
Isn't it, though? Fat babies. Don't they sound delicious? But I've never eaten any, for my conscience tells me that it is wrong. Hungry I was born, and hungry I shall die. But I'll not have any cruel deeds on my conscience to be sorry for.
Most Oz fans consider the Hungry Tiger to be the same character as the biggest of the tigers, who greeted the lion when he entered the forest in the first book. And in case you're wondering, no, he never eats a fat baby. At least not while on camera.
Ozma has brought her whole cabinet of advisors, as well as a small army of 27 soldiers, mostly captains, generals, and colonels, and one lonely private. And yes, this private is the same soldier we've seen in the last 2 books. He shaved his whiskers off in that second one. But they didn't come to rescue Dorothy. They came to rescue the royal family of Ev.
The meeting between Ozma and Dorothy is the one part of the book that really disappoints me. Maybe it's just because I grew up with comic books, and there was always the whole first you meet them and then you fight them because you misunderstand them, and then you team up with them and save the day, but Ozma and Dorothy meet with no fanfare, they barely talk, and then they become the best of friends off camera. In future books, they're so close that they're almost sisters. I wish we could have seen that happening.
Langwidere may not be very nice, but she too wants the royal family to return. For purely selfish reasons, since she hates ruling the kingdom and just wants to admire her heads all day. She liberates Dorothy and Billina, although Billina hates to leave since she's made so many good friends in the barnyard. Oh, Billina, one of your eyes is nearly pecked out and your comb is bleeding.
That's nothing. Just look at the speckled rooster. Didn't I do him up brown?
Have you been fighting?
I really think I have. You think I'd let that speckled villain of a rooster lord it over me and claim to run this chicken house as long as I'm able to peck and scratch? That is my name is Bill! It isn't Bill, it's Billina. And you're talking slang, which is very undignified.
Dorothy and her friends plot a course for the Gnome Kingdom, which is an easy walk with only one stop along the way. But it's one of the most important reasons to stop. Because it's hammer time. A giant clockwork automaton is pounding the path, blocking their way, but Ozma knows their concern is too legitimate to give up on. They have to run under it, timing it just right so the hammer won't hurt them. The Cowardly Lion and the Hungry Tiger are the fastest, carrying passengers on their back, and the robot can't touch them. But the Sawhorse is too slow, and the one private gets knocked off his back and onto the robot's arm, where all he can do is hang on and pray. The Scarecrow provides a soft landing for him, and he escapes with only a few pumps and a bump.
That's when Funky Headhunter. Prey? Have you seen her? Adam's Groove. I'm out.
Finally, they've reached the Gnome Kingdom. They're greeted cordially by a jolly fat man, not unlike Santa Claus, as Dorothy herself points out. Although his perfectly round body and the opulent belt he wears makes him look more like a Christmas ornament to me. His name is Roquat. This is the Gnome King himself.
Let me take a brief moment to confirm the spelling on these guys. These are not gnomes. They're just gnomes, like the city in Alaska. They don't hang around on your lawn or advertise cheap flights or steal underwear. They make pretty things like jewels and ornaments. And the nicest ornaments are made from the nicest people.
According to the laws of Ev, the king can do no wrong. He had a perfect right to sell his family to me in exchange for a long life.
The king of Ev did not have a long life. He jumped into the sea and was drowned.
Suppose that I gave you a pretty doll in exchange for a lock of your hair.
Oh! Could you maybe pick a less creepy sounding hypothetical situation?
And that after you received the doll, you smashed it into pieces. Could you say that I had not given you a pretty doll? Could you, in fairness, ask me to return the lock of hair?
Ozma can't argue, so she turns to threats of force. She did bring her 26 officers and 1 private to do the fighting for her. But Ozma only rules one country. The Gnome King rules the entire underground.
This has been a small part of my army!
They can't win by logic, they can't win by force, so the only way to win the queen and her children back is by challenging the Gnome King. This is where the third act of Return to Oz comes from, the Ornament Room.
You shall go into my palace and examine all that the rooms contain. Then you shall have permission to touch 11 different objects, pronouncing at the time the word Ev. And if any one of them proves to be the Queen of Ev or any of her children, they will be restored. If none of the 11 objects you touch proves to be of the royal family of Ev, then you yourself will become an article of bric-a-brac. This is only fair.
11 guesses? That's way too many, right? Even the most generous video games only give you 5 lives to start with. But the Gnome King's collection of tchotchkes is so incredibly extensive that Ozma, the first volunteer, whittles down her 11 guesses in no time. She finds herself transformed into an emerald grasshopper, and the next one to go gets 12 guesses. One by one, the party goes into the Ornament Room, although some of those brave soldiers have to be pushed. And no one has any idea what to look for in terms of ornaments, although the Gnome King does crack up at one point because the Tin Woodman has become something very funny. The mind reels.
Well, this is a fine kettle of fish. And on that note, when a man's an empty kettle...
Eventually it gets late. Dorothy and her remaining friends are shown to their sleeping quarters, but Dorothy cannot find Billina. This is because Billina found a comfortable place to sleep under the Gnome King's throne, and that's where she hears him chatting with his chief steward.
You are a fool to waste so much time on these people. Why didn't you enchant them all at once?
It's more fun this way. There is no chance of their guessing right. How could they know that the Queen of Ev and her family are all ornaments of a royal purple color?
Purple ornaments? Purple. Nah. Billina overhears the whole plan. The people from Ev are purple, the people from Oz are green, the Scarecrow and TikTok will be gold, Dorothy will be gray, and the Tin Woodman is something funny. That's all she gets out of him. But that's enough, and Billina goes to sleep with her secret. But the Gnome King never gets his gray ornament because the next morning, Dorothy happens to pick a correct ornament out of blind luck. A purple kitten happens to be Prince Evering of Ev, a mischievous little boy. A bell rings over the Gnome King's throne when she makes her guess, which disappoints him. But the next thing he hears terrifies him.
Good gracious, what's that?
I've just laid my egg.
What? Laid an egg in my throne room? Thunderation! Don't you know that eggs are poison?
Oh, brilliant! Think you could yell your weakness any louder? How long do you think Dorothy would have been captive of the Wicked Witch if she'd blown her baffle like that?
Now, my slaves, you will scrub the castle floors until they sparkle, or your lion friend will suffer. But don't splash that water around, it'll kill me.
Oops. Billina sees her chance and tells the Scarecrow not to take the egg away until the Gnome King lets her into the Ornament Room herself. The Gnome King agrees, and when her turn arrives, Billina marches in and proceeds to make 40 correct guesses in a row. The Queen of Ev and her children, Ozma, TikTok, the Scarecrow, oops, and the 27 soldiers. The Gnome King is not so jolly anymore.
The bell above the throne began to ring, and the king gave a start of annoyance and exclaimed, "Rockety rickets!" When the bell rang a second time, the king shouted angrily, "Smudge and blazes!" And at a third ring, he screamed, "Hippocaloric!" which must be a dreadful word because we don't know what it means.
But they still can't find the Tin Woodman. So Billina and her army go to confront the Gnome King, who is in no mood to argue. He's ready for a fight, and he's got all of his gnome soldiers there ready to massacre them. So Ozma orders her one soldier to fight, while all of his superiors cower behind him. But Billina and the Scarecrow have a better idea.
Help! Help!
Thousands of soldiers flee in terror from two little chicken eggs, and the Gnome King literally has egg on his face. He is helpless until his steward can bring a washcloth to save him with. But Dorothy has taken advantage of the confusion.
I'll transform you all into scorpions!
Why, you're not wearing your magic belt.
It's gone. And I'm ruined!
The Gnome King is helpless without his belt. The day is saved! Almost, except they still can't find the Tin Woodman. Really, none of those ornaments are funny out of all those thousands?
See here, girl. Give me the belt, and I will tell you what shape the Tin Woodman was changed into.
I have another idea. Let Dorothy transform the king into a goose egg unless he agrees to bring to us the ornament.
A goose egg? How dreadful! He's gone. The Tin Woodman is nowhere in the palace, and please don't change me into a goose egg, because I've done the best I could!
They decide the Gnome King has been punished enough, and they leave him behind. Knowing he has been completely defeated and will certainly never make trouble for them in the future. Just as a reminder, Ozma was a penniless orphan until a few months ago, but now her word is law, so no questioning her decisions. As the procession enters the gates of Ev, all anyone can think of is their sorrow over losing the Tin Woodman, until little Prince Evring starts tooting on a whistle. A very funny one.
Where'd you get it? I picked it up in the palace when Dorothy was making her guesses. Ev.
Good afternoon. I think I must have been asleep for the first time since I was made of tin.
I want my whistle!
Oh, for God's sake, Hungry Tiger, will you please eat him already? With the royal family of Ev back on the throne, Dorothy returns with her friends to Oz, where she gets to catch up on everything that happened while she was gone. She meets Jack Pumpkinhead and the Wogglebug, and she even gets to meet General Ginger, who is now the Scarecrow's friend.
I've married a man who owns 9 cows, and now I am willing to lead a quiet life.
Where's your husband?
He's in the house, nursing a black eye.
When they reach the Emerald City, Omby-Amby, formerly known as the Soldier with the Green Whiskers, is promoted to Captain General over all of his useless former superiors. There follow several days of feasting and frolics, hayrides and hijinks, until suddenly Dorothy remembers, I left my uncle in Australia! Ah! Poor Uncle Henry has been wasting away, thinking Dorothy drowned at sea. Dorothy's just about to wish herself to him, when Glinda points out that she lost her magic silver shoes doing that last time. The only thing to do is leave the belt in Ozma's care, along with Tick-Tock, although he really wanted to go to Australia. Now that they're good friends, Ozma agrees to look in on Dorothy every Saturday and teleport her to Oz if the situation demands it.
I must say, Dorothy, my dear, that you are very foolish to go back into that stupid humdrum world again. Uncle Henry needs me. No, I wasn't drowned at all. And I've come to take care of you, Uncle Henry, and you must promise to get well as soon as possible.
I'm better already, my darling.
Who is the hero of this story? Is it Ozma? Her name is in the title, and she does rescue Dorothy, but after that, her role is mostly to get turned into an ornament. For that matter, Oz barely figures into the story either. They just
go there when it's all over. That's going to be a recurring theme in future Oz books, by the way. What about Dorothy? She does make her dramatic return in this story, although she doesn't have nearly as many fearless little badass moments as she did in the first. Let's look at the initiation of the plot points. Who was it that saved Dorothy's life with her makeshift ship, found the key on the beach, overheard the Gnome King's evil plot, rescued Ozma, and provided the weapon that made the gnomes shrink in terror?
The title of the book really should be Billina of Ev. The hen is the hero of the story, and she has more than earned her place as a member of Ozma's royal court in future books. We'll see her again in the next book, so hope you're hungry! Man, does anyone else feel like... I don't know.
Fat babies.
No, I'm kidding. Let's just have some poison.
Okay, last time. This is eggs. This is your gnome on eggs. Any questions? I guess I wouldn't blame you if you had questions. That was a bit of a mixed metaphor. If you'd like to read Ozma of Oz yourself, good for you! Why don't you check out archive.org and gutenberg.org for free downloadable copies. But if you want a nice gift copy, check out the Books of Wonder edition, available at Amazon.com and wherever fine books are sold. And if you really want to get a jump on the Oz stories, The Hungry Reader recommends The Wizard of Oz, the first 5 novels, printed by Fall River Press.
Box. Pail. Box. Pail. Oh man, I screwed that up.